Thank you for visiting this video of St. Luke United Church of Christ in Beecher, Illinois. I'm Tom Ewing, the pastor here. This video contains the focused scripture lesson and the message that will be delivered later this morning at 10:15 in the sanctuary located at 725 Penfield Street. The worship service will be recorded and placed on our church's YouTube and Facebook pages and should be available by mid-afternoon. We hope you can join us in person later this morning, but if not, thank you for spending time with us on the internet. The focus scripture lesson this morning is from the second chapter of Luke, verses 41 through 52. Now every year his parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up as usual for the festival. When the festival was ended and they started to return, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but his parents did not know it. Assuming that he was in the group of travelers, they went a day's journey. Then they started to look for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem to search for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said to him, "Child, why have you treated us like this? Look, your father and I have been searching for you in great anxiety." He said to them, "Why were you searching for me? Did you not know that I must be in my Father's house?" But they did not understand what he said to them. Then he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was obedient to them. His mother treasured all these things in her heart, and Jesus increased in wisdom and in years, in divine and human favor. If you've ever been unfortunate enough to get lost in a strange city, then you can appreciate the great sense of relief you feel when you finally make it back to someplace familiar. There are few experiences more satisfying than finding your way back to the place you want to be. A few years back, an Asian woman was on a sightseeing tour in Iceland. After spending an afternoon exploring a volcanic canyon, the woman changed into fresh clothes and rejoined the rest of her tour group. Sadly, a member of their group was missing, and the tour director asked everyone to fan out over the park and look for the Asian woman, 5'3" tall, in dark clothing. The woman and her companions all paired up and began searching the park. Most people traveled on foot, but some rescue vehicles were sent out too. A helicopter pilot attempted to join the search from above, but had to turn back due to dense fog over the area. After 12 hours of frantic searching, the tour group and other searchers gathered back at their meeting spot to compare notes. And it was at this moment that a strange thought occurred to one of the searchers. "I'm an Asian woman, 5'3" tall, and I was wearing dark clothes before I changed my outfit." Yes, the woman had spent the last 12 hours searching for herself. It took a little doing, but she finally convinced her tour group and the police that she was the missing woman and she was safe and sound. Getting lost is an awful experience for the lost person and for all those who care about them. Speaking of being lost, there was a humorous news story in the paper several years back. It was about a 5-year-old Texas boy who was accidentally left behind at a Nashville, Tennessee service station. Tyler Payne got out of the family station wagon to use the restroom, then couldn't get out of the building because the door had become stuck. Meanwhile, his family headed home to Texas from Tennessee, where Tyler's grandparents live. About 2 hours later at a Wendy's restaurant in Jackson, his parents, 5 brothers, and a sister noticed he was missing. Back in Nashville, a woman had heard Tyler screaming and opened the bathroom door for him. As employees at the service station tried to help him, he cried, "I want my mommy." "This is embarrassing, but I'm glad he's safe," the boy's dad, Glenn Payne, an electrical engineer for General Dynamics Corp., said a few hours later. "We've all had a scare this evening." Sobs turned to smiles when Tyler saw his family. He showed his brothers and sister the teddy bears, coloring books, and candy given to him by detectives in Nashville's Metro Youth Guidance Center while he waited for his parents. "I told you your parents would come back," said Mary Brown, who was working at the service station and who comforted Tyler after he was found in the restroom. Glenn Payne said the family had spent Christmas with the parents of his wife, Chris, in Knoxville. They were on their way home to Weatherford, Texas at about 3:30 p.m. Friday when they stopped at the service station to refuel. We normally have a head count, but this time we didn't, Glenn Payne said. We were tired. After leaving the service station, Chris Payne drove while her husband and the children dozed. Chris talked to her son on the telephone before she and the family returned to Nashville. She said she was sick to her stomach when she found out her son was missing. When the family was finally reunited, the boy hugged his mother and told her, "I'm never going to the bathroom again." It's embarrassing to a family to misplace a child. These things happen from time to time, though. It happened to Mary and Joseph. They had been at the Passover celebration in Jerusalem. Their 12-year-old son Jesus was with them. They were part of a large company of pilgrims traveling together. It's not really surprising that they were a full day's journey away from Jerusalem before they realized that Jesus was not with them. They turned back to find their boy. They went seeking Jesus. In a few days, many Christians will be celebrating Epiphany. According to one tradition, the wise men found the newborn king not on Christmas Day, but 12 days after Christmas, or Epiphany. That's where the tradition of the 12 days of Christmas that we sing about comes from. The wise men came seeking the newborn king of the Jews. How many times have you seen on signs the motto, "Wise men still seek him"? And so they do. That is our theme for the day, seeking Jesus. The first question we might ask is this: is Christ missing from your life, from your work, from your marriage, from your family life? He is evidently missing from a great many families. It's obvious to me that we live in a culture that doesn't understand or value God's purposes for marriage and family. There are so many families today that have no foundation for their lives. All their energy is consumed with just external issues, managing their workload, juggling their schedules, paying bills, keeping up with the neighbors, keeping up appearances. There is no spiritual foundation, no eternal purpose that guides their relationships, their priorities, their goals. What a tragedy it is to see a Christian family whose values, priorities, relationships, and choices look no different from an unbelieving family. Many years ago, there was an article in the Washington Post in which the author suggested the idea of a wed lease. The wed lease would be a marriage contract. The couple could decide on the length of the contract, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, or more. When the contract expired, the couple could choose whether to renew the wed lease for a few more years or to dissolve the marriage and walk away. A contract instead of a covenant. A legal agreement instead of a lifetime commitment. We have forgotten that our marriages and families were created to reflect the sacrificial love between Jesus and the church. Our marriages and families were established to show the world what the love of God in action looks like. It's hard to experience the love, joy, and peace God made us for if we do not have Jesus Christ as the foundation of our relationships. Is Christ missing from your work, your marriage, your family? The second question is, when shall we begin seeking him? You and I are painfully aware of our need. We sense the emptiness, the loneliness, the fear. When shall we begin seeking diligently the one person who alone can meet our deepest needs? A woman named Janice was married to a carpenter, which sounds like a good thing. The man could build all sorts of useful things, but somehow Janice's husband could never get around to building and fixing certain things around his own house. For 10 years, Janice had asked him to build her a screen door for their kitchen. For 10 years, he had said he would do it, but he just kept putting it off. One day, he suddenly decided to work on that screen door. Within 2 hours, he had built the door and installed it. Janice was thrilled. The screen door was so pretty that Janice asked her husband if he would build another one for the front door. Her husband replied, "Are you kidding me? You can't just whip these things up, you know. It takes 10 years to build a door like this." Well, we all know it doesn't take 10 years to build a door, but we understand the temptation to put things off for a later date. It's aggravating when we put off necessary tasks like finishing a project, but it's soul-killing to put off confronting the most important questions in life, like, is there a God? If there is a God, then what is that God like, and what does that God require of me? And the questions I want all of us to wrestle with today: what would it take for me to commit my life to Jesus as my Lord and Savior? What would my life look like if I patterned it after the example of Jesus? Never delay that which needs to be done today. Is Jesus missing from your marriage, your family, from your life? When will you begin seeking him? Tomorrow? Next month? Next year? This brings us to another important question. Where shall we find him? The answer, of course, is everywhere. Everywhere. Some people find God in the beauty of nature. Dr. Francis Collins is the current director of the National Institutes of Health. A very smart man, very well educated. In his early 20s, he was an atheist. He thought that all faith systems were superstition. There just wasn't enough data for the existence of God. But two things caused him to question his atheism. The first was seeing how his patients' faith helped them to deal with suffering, and the second was reading the writings of that great Christian author C.S. Lewis. However, the moment that Dr. Francis Collins really found God was while he was hiking in the Cascade Mountains. The beauty of nature all around him made him long to know God. And he thought to himself, this is something I have really longed for all my life without realizing it. And now I've got the chance to say yes to God. So I said yes. I was 27, says Dr. Francis Collins. I never turned back. That was the most significant moment in my life. He had been wrestling with the questions of faith until he found God while hiking in the wilderness. Are you seeking Christ? He can find you in the most unlikely places. Many people find God in stressful circumstances. It's said that there are no atheists in foxholes. A man named Jason Richards was serving a life sentence for murder at Parkhurst Prison in the United Kingdom. Richards was searching for some way to relieve the guilt of his crimes and his wasted life. In the prison library, he read books on every major religion, hoping he would find answers and some sense of peace. And then he came upon the Bible. As he read the Bible, Jason Richards says he began to see the truth of God. And then a horrible thought hit Richards. If there is a God, then he, Jason, was a sinner. He says this thought made him feel desperate. He read the Bible nonstop, looking for some way to relieve the burden of his sins. And then he read Psalms 50 and 51, written by King David when he was racked with guilt and begging God to save him from his guilt and his sin. Jason Richards writes, I knew that God could forgive me. I didn't know anything about Jesus or the Bible or the church. I just knew. I read all the rest of the Psalms on my knees, and almost from that point for me, they became Psalms of praise. It was like I was beginning to worship, and I didn't know what worship was. Jason Richards found Christ in prison. Sometimes Jesus is found in the hardest and most heartbreaking moments of our lives. Times of great stress, great heartache, great concern will often turn our hearts to the one who can meet our deepest needs. But far better would it be if we settled the vital issues of life before a time of crisis. That brings us to the final thing to be said. Where then shall we find God? Most of us find him just where Mary and Joseph found him long ago, in his Father's house. Here, in the community of faith, is where most people find God. Many years ago, a woman named Michelle Stewart shared the story of her spiritual journey with Guidepost magazine. She and her husband, Michael, had been high school sweethearts. After they married, Michael settled into work and fatherhood and providing for his family. But Michelle found work and motherhood stifling. She enjoyed going out with friends and partying. In 1997, Michelle filed for divorce. She and Michael shared custody of their sons, Johnny and Cameron. A few years later, Johnny and Cameron mentioned to Michelle that their dad had been taking them to church, and they really enjoyed it. Michelle just rolled her eyes. She had no interest in church. But Johnny and Cameron continued to talk about enjoying church, and Michelle discovered that some of her new friends at work were also Christians. A strange yearning started growing in her. What was so exciting about church? She tried hard to avoid the subject, but she was starting to sense a hunger, an ache, a need that nothing else could fill. One Sunday morning, Michelle picked a random church out of the phone book, woke up Johnny and Cameron, and they all headed off for church. She was surprised to find that she enjoyed the message, and the people were nice. Let's hope visitors can say the same thing about our church. So she went back the next Sunday, and then the next. And soon Michelle began reading her Bible in the evenings, and one night as she read the Bible, she felt the urge to pray for her ex-husband, Michael. It was the strangest prayer, too. She felt the urge to pray that he would find a godly wife, a woman who was sincere in her faith, a woman who would love Michael and the boys. It's what he and the boys deserved, she thought. This became Michelle's sincere and regular prayer. She thought she was doing it for Michael and the boys, but she discovered that this prayer was also helping her to heal from the pain of their divorce. Not long afterwards, Michael mentioned that he had begun praying for a godly wife, and he was coming to Michelle to ask if she would consider couples counseling with him. She said yes. During the counseling sessions, Michelle fell in love with Michael, her ex-husband, in a whole new way. One evening after their sessions, Michael asked Michelle, for the second time, if she would be his wife. They got remarried in 2004. In returning to the church, Michelle Stewart found new life in Jesus Christ. And this new life in Christ led to the healing of her marriage and her family. Friends, is Jesus missing from your work, your marriage, your family, or from your life in general? Why not seek him out today? He has promised that if with all our hearts we truly seek him, we shall surely find him. He is here now. He's waiting, available, calling your name. Won't you open your heart and let him come in and reside today? Until we meet again, may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace. Amen.